The rain fell like punishment. A 68-year-old woman stood on the edge of her son's porch, soaked to the bone, clutching a single suitcase. Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from betrayal. Eric, I'm your mother. You were my responsibility. I'm done being your charity case. He slammed the door. Just like that, his own mother. Kicked out. What he didn't know? Margaret Hale wasn't broke. She was hiding $1.4 million in silent investments, and what she did next made the entire town whisper for years. A mother's sacrifice. Margaret Hale had lived a simple life. No flashy cars, no vacations, no designer clothes. Just a quiet home, a stack of mystery novels and pictures of her late husband and only son. She raised Eric on her own after her husband died in a factory fire. Worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, skipped meals so Eric could eat, bought secondhand clothes. When Eric graduated from college, she cried with pride. She gave him everything. But once he married Danielle, a sleek real estate agent with a sharp tongue and colder heart, things changed. Danielle never liked Margaret's old ways. She said Margaret's house smelled too dusty, her stories were too boring, and her presence was too much. Soon Eric asked Margaret to sell her home and move in with them, just until things settle. She agreed, of course she did, but months turned to years. Her tiny room became a storage closet. Her place at the dinner table vanished. Then the final straw. Danielle told Margaret she had to leave because they were expecting a second baby and needed the space. The last straw on a stormy Thursday, Margaret overheard Danielle speaking to Eric. I'm not raising 2 kids and a grandma, Danielle said. She doesn't pay rent. She doesn't even do anything except sit and knit. What are we, a retirement home? Eric replied, fine, I'll talk to her. Tonight. That night, Eric stood by the front door with Margaret's suitcase. Mom, this isn't working anymore. She blinked. You're kicking me out? You'll be fine. There's a shelter downtown. Danielle found the number. The pain hit her like a punch to the chest. But she didn't cry. She just looked at her son, the boy she had once rocked to sleep, and nodded. She stepped off the porch. Cold rain hit her face. But inside her coat pocket was something no one knew about, a key to a storage unit that held a locked briefcase. Inside that briefcase, proof that Margaret Hale was not just a broke, forgotten mother. The $1 million secret flashback. In 1999, Margaret had helped a skinny, nervous 19-year-old named Jonas Wexler, who spent his days studying at the library where she worked. He'd lost his scholarship and slept on the floor behind the stacks. She brought him coffee and let him use the back room to work. You'll build something amazing someday, she said. One day, Jonas offered her something. I'm launching a tech startup. It's dumb, maybe, but if you want, I'll let you invest. Even a little helps. She gave him $2,000, all her savings at the time. I don't want to lose it, she warned. You won't, he smiled. I promise. Years later, Jonas became one of the youngest tech billionaires in America. He never forgot the woman who gave him hope. He called her every Christmas, asked if she needed anything. She always said no. But secretly, he'd placed $1.4 million worth of stock in her name under an alias, M. Harper, just in case. And now, it was time to reclaim her identity. From shelter to skyline, Margaret arrived at the shelter, quiet and shaken. But she was different from the others. She wasn't broken. She asked to use the computer. Logged into a private portal, typed in, Wexlock Trust, M. Harper. Her eyes filled with tears. Balance, $1,412,822.1. With trembling fingers, she clicked Withdraw and selected Transfer to New Account, Private Management. A new beginning. The next morning, she left the shelter before sunrise. 2 days later, a quiet headline appeared in the local newspaper. Reclusive widow purchases $2.3 million estate in Willow Ridge Hills. No one knew it was Margaret. She hired lawyers, set up trusts, transferred the money under her real name. She bought a car, visited a spa. For the first time in years, she smiled. But this was just the beginning. Margaret hadn't forgotten what Eric did. She didn't want revenge, wanted justice, and she was about to change everything. Not just for herself, but for everyone Eric and Danielle ever stepped on. Eric adjusted his tie nervously as he walked into the grand ballroom of the Willow Ridge Foundation Gala, a high society event filled with the town's richest elites. He wasn't rich enough to be a regular guest, but Danielle had pulled strings. "This is our big break," she whispered. "Imagine how many houses we'll sell after tonight." Eric forced a smile. "Right, just play it cool." The ballroom sparkled. Crystal chandeliers, velvet-draped tables, violinists playing softly in the background. And in the center of the room, surrounded by local press and politicians, was a woman in a shimmering emerald green gown, calm, graceful, familiar. Danielle narrowed her eyes. "Wait, is that?" Eric turned and froze. It was Margaret. Unrecognizable, gone was the quiet, gray-haired woman in oversized sweaters. Margaret's hair was styled into soft curls, her makeup subtle, elegant. She wore diamond earrings and a smile that made half the room lean in. Eric blinked. Is that Mom?" "She looks like royalty," Danielle muttered. Before they could approach her, a man stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer beamed, "please welcome our guest of honor, philanthropist and investor, Mrs. Margaret Hale." Applause thundered. Eric's jaw dropped. Danielle whispered, "Investor? Of what?" Margaret took the mic with grace. "I spent most of my life being quiet, ignored, but not anymore. Tonight I'm pledging $500,000 to build housing for senior women facing homelessness." The crowd stood and clapped again. Cameras flash. And Eric? He wanted to disappear. After the event, Eric and Danielle finally worked up the courage to approach her. "Mom," Eric called out, It's good to see you." Margaret turned calmly. "Eric." "Danielle." Danielle forced a grin. "Wow, you look amazing. We had no idea you were doing so well." Margaret nodded. "That's because you never asked." A pause. Eric rubbed his neck. "Listen, I feel terrible about what happened. I was under a lot of pressure. And Danielle told you to throw your mother on the street like a broken chair?" Margaret's voice was soft but sharp. Eric paled. "We were just overwhelmed. The baby, the bills." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You live in a 6-bedroom house, Eric. The only thing you lacked was heart." Danielle stepped forward, her tone changing. "But surely now that things have changed, we can reconnect." Margaret smiled sweetly. "Oh, I'm already reconnecting. With people who value me. You'll see." She turned and walked away, leaving them stunned. The next morning, Eric opened the local paper and nearly choked on his coffee. Margaret Hale purchases former Wexler estate, becomes top shareholder in Wexler Tech. He read it twice. She owned part of Wexler Tech? Eric nearly dropped the cup. Danielle snatched the paper and screamed, "She's richer than us?" He grabbed his phone and dialed. "Mom, Margaret, listen, I know we made mistakes. I was stressed. Danielle was hormonal. We were wrong." A pause. "I want you back in our lives. Please." Margaret's voice was calm. "Eric, I begged you not to turn me away. I cried. You slammed the door." "I know, and I regret it." Margaret's voice turned steel. "No, Eric, you regret getting left behind." Click. The following week, Margaret visited a struggling senior housing complex. She wrote a personal check to cover renovations, nurses' meals. For 2 years, the head nurse hugged her. "God bless you," Margaret smiled. I've just seen what happens when we don't protect each other. She became a local legend. Her story of hidden wealth, betrayal, and rebirth spread like wildfire. People started calling her the Quiet Queen. And Eric, he lost clients. Danielle's reputation tanked. Their social circle vanished overnight. His phone stopped ringing. Then one day a letter arrived, handwritten, sealed, from Margaret. "Dear Eric, this is not revenge. It's revelation. You judged my worth by my bank account. You measured my love by how useful I was to you. But I raised you better than that. I hope someday you teach your son what I tried to teach you. Love doesn't come with conditions. Until then, don't worry about me. I've finally remembered who I am." Mom Danielle sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the letter. She was just an old woman, she whispered. Eric shook his head. She was a force of nature, and we never even knew. Danielle looked up. Do you think she'll forgive us someday? Eric didn't answer, because deep down, he knew the truth. They didn't lose her money. They lost her on. It was a warm spring afternoon when Margaret Hale stood at the edge of her new community garden, once an abandoned lot, now alive with sunflowers, herbs, and kids giggling as they chased butterflies. She bent down to help a little girl plant a tomato seedling. You see this? Margaret said gently. You give it time, patience, a little love, and it grows strong. The girl nodded and smiled. What Margaret didn't say out loud, that she wasn't just planting vegetables, she was planting a legacy. A knock at her door later that evening. Margaret was having tea on her front porch when there was a knock at her gate. She looked up, and her heart paused. It was Lucas, Eric's son, 8 years old. Backpack slung over his shoulder, shoes muddy, eyes puffy from crying. Margaret rushed over. Lucas? He nodded silently. I walked. I remembered the road. I wanted to see you. She knelt down, hugged him tightly. Did something happen? He sniffled. Mommy and Daddy fight a lot. I heard them say your name. I miss you, Grandma. Margaret felt her chest tighten. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his bag. I drew this. It was a picture of her, smiling, holding a big red heart, and the words, my grandma is my superhero. A difficult choice. That night, Margaret sat by the fire with Lucas sleeping in the guest room. She opened her journal, staring at a list she'd made months ago. Build housing for Women Fund Mobile Medical Clinic. Open public library in Eastview. Reconnect with Lucas. She thought of the years she'd lost, the love she'd given that was discarded, the apology that never came, and the boy upstairs, who still had a chance. The letter, again. The next morning, Margaret called Eric. Come pick up your son, she said without greeting. He sounded relieved. Thank God, we were freaking out. But listen closely, Margaret continued. You're not the one I called for. I only did this for him. Eric hesitated. Mom, I'm sorry. You're not sorry. You're embarrassed, she replied, cool but calm. But this isn't about us anymore. I don't understand, Margaret sighed. Number you never did, but maybe your son will. The unthinkable. 2 weeks later, Eric received a registered package from Margaret's lawyer. Inside, a trust document in Lucas's name, a handwritten note, and a final shock. Eric, I've established a $1 million education trust for Lucas. He can access it when he turns 18, if he earns it through kindness, respect, and compassion. You won't be managing it. You've already proven you can't be trusted with what's priceless. But your son? He still has hope. Tell him I believe in him, even if I no longer believe in you. Your mother, Margaret. Eric stared at the letter for a long time, and for the first time in years, he cried. Months passed. Margaret continued her work, quietly transforming the town. A local reporter interviewed her for a feature titled, From Forgotten to Fierce, How a Kicked-Out Mother Became a Town's Guardian Angel. Margaret just smiled when asked what motivated her. Sometimes, she said, you have to lose everything to remember what you're really worth. The interviewer asked, do you regret anything? Margaret looked off into the garden. Only that I stayed silent for so long. But not anymore. 10 years later, the camera fades in on a college graduation stage. A young man in a cap and gown steps forward. Lucas Hale, the announcer beams, valedictorian and recipient of the Margaret Hale Character Scholarship. Lucas takes the mic. His voice trembles as he speaks. When I was a boy, my parents used to talk about my grandma like she was just some old burden. But to me, she was a hero. She gave quietly. She loved loudly. And she taught me that kindness is the most powerful kind of wealth. He pauses, holding back tears. I wish she were here today. From the back of the crowd, a woman in a wheelchair, older now but still glowing with grace, claps with misty eyes. Margaret had lived to see the boy become a man. Closing shot, Margaret, alone in her garden once more, gently runs her fingers over a marble bench. Etched in gold. To those the world overlooked, may you always know your worth. She breathes in the air, no longer forgotten, no longer silent. She had lost a son, but she had changed a future. And that was worth more than $1.4 million.